is up, my nerd herders? Welcome back to the channel. I am the Crowlector, and as you can see, we have in front of us a wide breadth of Star Wars Black Series figures. I've been stockpiling these guys over the last couple weeks. A lot of them I got on a visit home a couple weeks ago, and have been saving them for a special occasion to review. We have a lovely little mix of old figures that have been redone, some new figures, some new looks for old characters, things like that. In this video, I'm going to be taking a look at the ISB Trooper and the Night Trooper. And here we have our ISB Trooper and two Night Troopers. I did want to go ahead and army build this guy to go along with the Night Trooper that we have, Enoch, and that whole crew, whereas I was okay with just one single ISB Trooper. He kind of strikes me more as like a single guy. I suppose you could head swap him with some other extra figures you have lying around. I guess we'll go ahead and take a look at him first. Now, obviously, I am more than happy to add any and all Andor figures to the shelf. I absolutely loved the series, and while we wait some more of the named characters, I'll take a couple army builders in the meantime. I do really dig the kind of mix of the Imperial officer uniform with the Stormtrooper uniform. Just slightly more tactical, nothing too crazy. I do really like when they add some more black to the sort of standard trooper design. Nothing against the regular Stormtrooper design, of course, but I do like those splashes of color that really make them stand out against what is otherwise like a sea of white. Now, I don't know if this is necessarily modeled after any specific actor. You can take off his little hat there. I don't remember there being an officer that looks like this. There very well could have been, though. With these army builders, you never quite know. But either way, a really good likeness. Or I guess a likeness of perhaps no one in particular. I do like the hatted look. Just to add a little bit more black. Now this guy is exclusive to Target. I had a birthday coupon, so went ahead and used it on this guy to bring him down a bit. I really wanted to add something more to my Andor shelf, so while I probably should have waited for him to go on sale, as a lot of the Target exclusives normally do, I was just having a bit of Andor fever, you know? So I just went ahead and grabbed him, took a couple bucks off, and I don't regret it. This is a really cool, nice figure. I really love the extra kind of pouches along the belt, those little pops of silver on the belt and the straps there. There's just something really cool about this figure, this design. It does come with, I believe, a fully new gun. If it's not new, I don't remember any other times that we've seen it. The double scope there, very long barrel, the kind of bump stock here in the back. Now, sometimes with these armored figures, you do have a little bit of some difficulty getting them to hold the guns in totally natural looking fashions. Happy to say that's not necessarily the case with him. He can still get some good range of motion. I guess because there's not quite as much armor along the forearms there, he can hold it really any which way you'd like. But speaking of articulation, he's pretty standard, while also excelling a little bit more than your standard trooper. Does have your typical ball-jointed head, no lower neck movement. I know some of the recent Black Series figures have been getting the double neck, not so much here, but with how the armor sits along the bottom of the neck, I don't know how that would really work or how it would be implemented, so I can see why they didn't. Shoulder-wise, these pauldrons are technically a separate piece, but they are not on any sort of little flap like some other ones, but just the way that they kind of stand where the curve goes under the armor, luckily you can still get a good amount of motion, upward motion. Not quite a straight T, but close enough. Standard pinless swivel hinge on the elbow, a swivel hinge with the upward hinge on the wrist versus the side to side. With a lot of troopers, with the forearm armor, it kind of limits the amount of range you can get from the wrists, and that is definitely the case here. Not quite as bad on the forearm, but because of the way that this kind of juts outward, it does get in the way. But you can still get some good poses out of him. It is technically a ball joint on the waist, but really, you're only looking at side to side. There's really barely any forward movement. But it does have a softer plastic skirt, so you still get some good range of motion. He can still do his little rocket high kick. Nice split action. He can even stand. Look at that. All the Imperials, I'm sure, have their secret hobbies. So let's go ahead and pretend that this guy is a dancer. There is a swivel at the top of the thigh as well. You do have double knees, though they are not pinless. You do see those little pins sticking out. At least they had the wherewithal to paint them the same color as his pants, so they don't stick out too much, but it's a bit of a bummer. But even still, with the shin armor, you still get a good amount of range and a lot more downward movement from the foot. So obviously some good kind of rocking side to side, but you're not going to get much upward. Here he is with some of our other Andor army builders, and I think it's like a really nice blend of the two. He does share the same chest armor from this Ferrix trooper, obviously just painted white instead of black, but more color in the straps as well. But this guy's not quite as armored up. So this one's definitely more expendable, you could say, more of a grunt than this guy. But he does utilize some pieces from the more officer figure as well. Obviously the hat, the hat is shared, I believe, no, actually not. I was going to say maybe the legs, the puffy pants, but these are definitely different. And they're also not quite the same as the Ferrix Trooper as well. They're I don't know if they are completely new, but nice to see that they didn't just completely reuse those pieces. I was also going to say that they reused the shin armor, but that is actually not true. This one has more of like the T shape going all the way across, whereas the ISB officer kind of stops. It's not the full all the way across. There's no downward part on the side. So he actually does seem to use a lot of newer pieces. Now, like I said, these are figures that are sort of ripe for customizing. I do wish that they gave us swappable heads, swappable faceplates like they did with the Hoth Trooper and the Endor Trooper. Otherwise, you're just left with a bunch of kind of boring white guys on your shelf, which is fitting for the Empire. But if you have any extra heads laying around, you can certainly swap them with any of these guys to add a little bit of flair to your shelf. All in all, it's a very nice figure. Very simple, but at the same time, I don't really know what else they could have added to him to really, liven him up, other than, like I said, a swappable head, maybe a helmet or something you could add. But other than that, he's a really, really nice figure. Moving now to our Ookie Spooky Death Troopers. I am employing the use of one of my extra McFarlane stands. Very nice, very handy to have extra, because especially on some of these more armored figures, they do tend to be a little top heavy, not quite get as much range of motion, especially in the feet. But for the more like zombie-like characters like these, just to differentiate them a little bit, since the armor is exactly the same, I want to strike some kind of spooky poses, lots of angles to kind of give that undead look. I know they're not like full mindless zombies in the show, but it's fun to pretend, And this is a very, very cool figure. I think this is what a lot of people were kind of hoping for with the first Night Trooper release, which was definitely more of a standard kind of reuse figure. A lot less new parts, a lot less of the wrappings, the sculpted, gold details. This is a really nice figure that really catches the light in all the right places. One thing I will say that's a bit of a bummer is that they don't add as much, or really any, gold to the cracks on the back. That is something that you could technically do yourself, fill it in with like a gold paint pen, even if you're not really going to be displaying it with the back facing front. But even still, it's those little cut corners that are a bit of a bummer. But this is an example of a figure, again, that I think maybe could have benefited from some sort of like swappable helmet or something, maybe one that was a complete helmet versus the broken off thing, because otherwise you're just going to have every single one you get broken off in the same place, which wouldn't be very likely. You know, maybe they all sustained the exact same damage. Who knows? It's a small nit in the grand scheme of things. I've not taken the helmet off to see if there is like a fully sculpted head underneath. It does seem like they at least sculpted most of it. You can see some good mouth action on pretty much both sides. So while I'm not expecting like fully painted eyes or anything, if you're a good enough customizer, you might be able to take the helmet off and then just paint whatever details you want. Now, articulation-wise, he kind of suffers in the way that the ISB agent did, and then some. You do get a nice ball-jointed head, and this one does technically have that double neck. Because you're not really lining up like an Adam's apple or anything like that, it doesn't really matter what way it's facing, but it does let you get just that little bit extra upward or downward movement. The shoulder pauldrons do not benefit from what the ISB agent had, where it kind of tucks under the armor, but even still, luckily it is a softer plastic, so you can get a good amount of upward motion, but then it does push that shoulder armor to kind of an unnaturally floppy degree. So I don't know if you want to. Totally up to you. Personally, I like viewing these guys as like stiff zombies. So whatever movement they get is going to be very angular, very stiff, very undead. But we do have some nice pinless elbows with a swivel hinge. I love that little splash of silver paint on the side there. That is something that they easily could have left unpainted. So credit where credit is due. And then this one does have the more typical side-to-side wrist movement versus the up and down ball joints. And you do get a little bit more movement than the ISB Trooper. Nothing at the bottom of the waist though, just this top ab crunch. And then again, it's sort of like the opposite of the ISB agent because of how the armor sticks up. You're not going to get much side to side. You can if you really kind of push it. I don't know over time, though, how much warpage or breakage is going to lead on the top of the armor. And even still, you don't get that much. Maybe he was a dancer in his past life, but the poor zombie cannot do the splits anymore. But you do get the upper thigh swivel as well, which actually I kind of like the gold facing front there. I may have to change it on this one. I can't tell if this technically is a double knee. It only really goes up a little bit past 90 degrees anyway because of the armor. So I guess we'll count it as like a single knee. And then with the foot, because of the armor again, mostly side to side, mostly swivel, not much up and down. Pretty standard for the more armored army builders. And I think in a weird way, at least in my own headcanon, it does work for these guys because they are supposed to be, I think, a little bit more stiff, a little bit less mobile, but your mileage may vary. Accessory-wise, they do come with this nice gun, which I do believe we have seen before, I want to say, on the Death Troopers. But it's nice to get something that's a little bit different than just your standard Stormtrooper rifle, again and again. Here they are all together, our Night Trooper Squadron. I keep wanting to call them Death Troopers, just because they are dead. And they are technically, these guys at least, in the Death Trooper armor. So forgive me if I slip up. But you can see what I mean with these earlier Night Trooper and Enoch figures, where Enoch's not quite so bad, and I know his armor was like this in the show. He benefits from those little bits of crimson, obviously really cool. I guess you would call it a face sculpt in his helmet. The other Night Trooper didn't have quite as much detail. You do have the sculpted red ribbon on the upper body, but nothing on the lower body, except for this one little leg piece here, which is fine. I know that, obviously, like I said, not every Night Trooper is going to have the exact same damage, so I don't mind that this one is a little bit plain on the underside. Maybe this one is more freshly dead. He hasn't been brought back as many times. Oddly enough, though, you do get the gold painted on the back. I'm definitely going to have to try and fill that in. I would like another of these lighter white ones with the gray. I do like that just overall color combo, the gray, the red, the gold. Unfortunately, this was only available in a 2-pack with Enoch. Hopefully, we'll see a single release of it in the future, maybe with a little bit more added ribbons. This is something I think that they could really get away with doing like a multi-pack of, or I know there's really no way to do like a build your own kind of thing with the Night Troopers, but that would be really cool, where you could customize like the ribbons on the legs but not on the arms, or vice versa, things like that. But all in all, I do really, really dig these Night Troopers. They're so different and sort of borderline spooky, which is definitely up my alley. I hope we see more of them in Ahsoka Season 2. I do like the stuff that we got in Season 1, and I'm excited to see what else they can do, especially Enoch. I do hope he gets a nice standout moment, other than just kind of standing around like he did in Season 1. But that'll about do it for this review, guys. Again, we have the ISB Trooper, which check your guys' targets or check target.com. They do tend to have a lot of sales, so even if you're holding off on this guy, I would definitely recommend grabbing at least one just to add a little bit more vibrancy to your shelf, especially your Andor shelf. And the 2 Night Troopers. With these guys, they're not perfect figures. Some might even say they're not even worth the regular base price point. I'd say, if you're going to mess around with them a little bit, especially with the Night Troopers, mess around with the posing. You can get them into some really fun poses that really make the figures, no pun intended, come alive. These are figures that you're going to get out of them what you put into them. But let me know what you guys think below. If you're grabbing any of these army builders, if so, how many? Are you going to have a whole squadron of Death Troopers? Maybe try and switch helmets on these guys. Let me know what else you do with the ISB agent as well, if you put maybe an old Imperial fin on him. That's something I've seen a lot of people do. But yeah, just let me know, you guys. Thank you so much for watching, you guys. I will be back soon with more creepy collection content, especially as we move into the Halloweeny season. But, in the meantime, don't forget, you guys, stay spooky.